So way back in the year 2022, through the course of February, I was making a video on 8 improvements that I wanted to see in the next Xenoblade game, which was coming along smoothly until... The 9th rolled around and revealed Xenoblade Chronicles 3, showing off most of the features that I was going to talk about in that very video. And up to this day, it still remains unfinished, left to rot in the memory banks of what could be. Until now. So with that in mind, these are the features that I want to see packaged into Xenoblade Chronicles 4. Minor spoilers ahead. With each new Xenoblade game, we're presented with new worlds to explore, new sights to see, and new vistas to unlock, making each world feel unique, yet ever-changing, like the worlds of Xenoblade are evolving as we progress through them. Even so, the towns and colonies have felt rather stagnant in comparison to the rest of the world around them, reusing the same formula since the series' debut in 2010. Now don't get me wrong, these areas aren't bad in their own right, and I still thoroughly enjoy venturing around some of these locales from time to time, which is why I think these areas deserve some love and should be updated for the next gen consoles. One of the most distinctive things about Xenoblade colonies is the affinity system, supposedly representing the general populace's fondness towards the party. And whilst progressing through the tiers, we unlock new quests, new purchasable items, and from Xenoblade 2 onwards, new passive perks and or abilities, but we can do much better than this. I propose we add affinity missions, which function like extra difficult quests and are required to progress to the next affinity level. Each mission would be given out by the leader or commander of the colony, tackling some of the issues or conundrums the settlement faces in its current climate, varying the contents and requirements of each quest, and on completion, the player would be rewarded with a significant change to the surrounding area. This could include the town being expanded, allowing for new homes and NPCs to inhabit the area, or perhaps a wandering Noppon merchant would decide to set up shop in town for a while and trade rare items with you. Or maybe you could even purchase a house and transform it into a hub for the party, acting like a campfire in some of the more recent games. Ultimately, the picture I'm trying to paint to you all is something akin to the Colony 6 reconstruction side quest, but far less annoying. Instead of just searching for black liver beans to turn into houses, we might have to hunt some enemies that are preventing a new construction project from being completed, or escort an important person to a certain location, something that always then has a change on the environment, transforming our world and making it feel alive, to the point where its finalized form should be unrecognizable to what it once was. Now, some of you may have the concern that with all this extra work and more challenging quests, these missions themselves are going to be a nuisance to complete, but that's where you'd be wrong, thanks to our Noppon merchant friend that I mentioned earlier. These guys should always be the reward for reaching the second stage of affinity in a given area, and they will bring back the long lost mechanic of trading. Granted, some changes would have to be made, but being able to trade for rare and hard to find items in any given area will reduce some of the frustration that some of the collection quests in these games pose, and by simply having access to one of these guys in every area, trading most of the items that are unique to them, the endgame grind no longer has to feel like one, and we can make the most of the side content that is always available in volumes. Combat in a new Xenoblade title is always a topic of interest within the entire community, as each new entry has brought us something new to experiment with, like Xenoblade 1's vision mechanic and Xenoblade X's overdrive system. But for the next game, I hope that they emphasize and build the system around real-time mechanics. Xenoblade traditionally uses a percentile-based accuracy system, where the game calculates in the background whether an attack will hit or miss, based on yours and the opponent's dexterity velocity and agility stats respectively. This means that a move's animation doesn't necessarily need to connect with the opponent to actually hit, and likewise it becomes impossible to avoid attacks even if you have subsequently moved out of the way. This system is the literal bread and butter that makes the Xenoblade combat systems work, and whilst I don't want to completely overhaul it, I do think that there's space to mix things up a little with something that I call action arts. Instead of the normal accuracy system, special specific arts will be calculated based on whether the player is standing in the firing range, shown through a red area of effect indicator, an idea that has already been used in countless other games, and Xenoblade 3 during the Colony Lambda boss fight. In fact, there's already a number of arts which I think would work great with this system, like the Brog's dive attack and Seraphic Seratina's charge. Furthermore, pairing this with a press the attack mechanic like the one in Final Fantasy XVI could also add a lot to the boss fights, granting the opportunity to prevent a powerful party-wiping attack and being rewarded with a force topple on the enemy. The main purpose of these systems is to encourage an in-the-moment style of gameplay, reacting to things on the fly and placing an emphasis on an individual player's expertise, increasing the skill ceiling in a way that forces the player to take control of the situation before them, rather than allowing the game to do all the hard work for you. To further accentuate this, if I was to roughly design the combat mechanics for the next game, they'd look a little something like this. Before Xenoblade 3 first released, we speculated that combat used a stance mechanic, where every party member could change on will into a different stance, granting a certain flexibility to each role, and not limiting any one style of play. Lanz's Heavy Guard class works as a great example, as he would be able to switch between a strong fierce attacker with his greatsword to deal massive damage and build aggro, and a stalwart shielder, protecting his allies and reducing the damage received of all those standing near him. Making good use of this mechanic would once again help emphasize a player's skill, as switching between each form on the fly would be necessary to excel within the game, and encourage experimentation between different builds and loadouts to find what works best in any one given scenario. Pair this with some form of a real-time chain attack system, which is basically just the overdrive mechanic, tweaked so it isn't infinite and utilizes a special talent art attack when the effect ends, and we have close to what I would consider the perfect combat mechanics. That said, I'm not a games designer, so I don't have all the details and nuances of this mechanic laid out, but something like this could keep the core fundamentals of Xenoblade combat in place, whilst adding an entirely new way to play the games. Now on to a topic that I'm known for discussing a little more than everything else on this list. The lore. Every Xenogame's lore has always been incredibly deep, if a little convoluted at times, and this can make it difficult for everyone to understand what is going on 100% of the time, especially the casual fans who don't nearly break down these games as much as myself. That's why presentation of these lore details are so incredibly important, and whilst the games, for the most part, do a pretty good job of conveying the lore without confusing the player every 5 minutes, it certainly isn't perfect. Xenoblade 3 especially. This is why I hope and pray that the next Xenoblade game will implement something similar to the Final Fantasy XVI active time lore events. This was by far the most innovative feature implemented into this game, and it does an amazing job of informing the player about the world, circumstances, and characters on screen, as well as acting like a reminder, which is very helpful when your narrative is over 70 hours long. Additionally, this mechanic could also help explain concepts from the previous games for those who haven't played them, continuing Monolith's current goal of making each game enjoyable independently of one another, regardless if you're a newcomer to the series or a long-term veteran. In fact, one thing Xenoblade has always lacked is written lore, instead prioritizing cutscenes and story-related events to do most of the heavy lifting, but this isn't always enough. even though it sounds simple, readable lore is a staple within JRPGs, as it serves as an easy way to explain complicated lore in a digestible fashion. It's such a common thing, in fact, that Takahashi even uses it in abundance within his older works, either in the form of the Xenosaga database, which contains over 450 different entries, or by simply hiding it away in endgame areas, revealing the backstory of characters like Ziggy and Big Joe. And it's not like this would go amiss in the newer entries either. Xenoblade 3, for instance, could have easily implemented something similar by us unlocking a secret room that leads to Origin's memory vault, which could tell us things like what the world was like before the merge, how they constructed Origin, how Mobius captured Melia, tease the events of Future Redeemed, reveal what Matthew got up to after leaving the city, and show what part Nia had in Noah and Mio's resurrection after becoming Mobius. I can't stress enough how many of Xenoblade 3's little but important questions could easily be answered if something like this was available, and realistically, we have one more chance for the devs to add a quest like this when the Noah and Mio amiibos release at the start of next year. So I guess we can only hope that Monolith Soft goes to the extra effort with the next and likely final update for Xenoblade 3. So this topic is harder to pin down, as Takahashi has already mentioned that he wants to do something vastly different for the next game, which myself and many others have taken to mean a change in genre, focusing more so on the sci-fi elements of the series, as it heads towards something similar to Xenosaga or Xenoblade X. Consequently, it's difficult to predict exactly which direction the series, and thus its world design, will go, but under the assumption that it will remain Xenoblade-ish, then I have a few extra suggestions. Xenoblade 3's region system is ingenious for the player to adventure through, and for future entries, I'd like to see something similar. I consider each individual area the equivalent of a Minecraft biome, and the ones that were themed similarly, such as Alace Highway, Aegis Wilderness, and Danaher Desert, work amazingly in conjunction with one another, and it's this aspect that I hope they carry over to the next game. That said, the Xenoblade 3 region system itself brings with it a whole host of problems that lead to Ionios being the lackluster mess it is, so some additional tweaks, which I'll talk about in a separate video soon, would also be a necessity, which is why following the design philosophy of Mira instead will be a huge step forwards. Noctilum is the perfect example of this idea at its best, as can be seen easily from above, with the whole area incorporating a variety of different terrain layouts and flora, all of which stick to its jungle-esque theme to create one of the most diverse and thrilling places to explore in the Xeno series. With a beautiful and incredible world like this, however, it's important that people get to see it as quickly as possible, and although the boat was a great start, we need some faster forms of transportation in the next game. I don't care whether it's in the form of pilotable mechs or rideable mounts or even a simple sprint button. The navigation through our Xenoblade worlds needs updating, and this will be the perfect time to do so. And those were the features and additions which I would like to see implemented into the next Xenoblade game. Let me know in the comments below if you agree with me on any of these points, and if there are any other features you'd like to see incorporated into the next game. With all that out of the way, I appreciate you all for watching this video and hope you've enjoyed. If you have, make sure to smash that subscribe button below to stay up to date with all the latest and greatest Xenoblade content. It's free and it helps me out a ton. I once more thank you for watching this far into the video, and I'll catch you in the next one. This is JB, signing off.